Peace and blessings. Welcome to my channel. My name is Taj Utsi and I'm a certified financial coach. I'm also the founder of True Financial Coaching, where our mission here is to educate, enlighten, and equip individuals with the financial literacy that is needed in order to get off the rat wheel. What is the rat wheel? The rat wheel is when one is constantly financing things that go down in value for them, but up in value for the banks at the same time. Somebody say, well, how can that happen? Well, when things go down in value for you, those things depreciate over time. But at the same time as depreciating, going down in value for the consumer, it's going up in value for the banks. Why? Because of interest. The banks are earning interest off of depreciating objects that individuals finance. So it's not until one wakes up and realizes that they are the rat that's powering the wheel that they'll do what it takes in order to stop powering the wheel. Doing what it takes, meaning they create a plan for themselves, get out of debt, make a budget, save up some money, and then continue to invest in themselves. When one does that, then they become free naturally to do what they want when they want, instead of having to do the things that they don't want. Today's video is answering a question that someone put in the one of the viewers put in the comments section of one of my other videos. One of the video I did about a month ago, should I pay off my mortgage early? And the question was from Kiam 5738. I hope I'm saying that right. But the question was, can you go over the emergency savings of 3 to 6 months? Which is an excellent question. It's a very good question because, according to certain studies that I've looked at, one in particular, Bankrate, they surveyed several Americans, I believe about 1,000 Americans, I believe, but in their findings, they saw that about 37% of Americans could afford a $200, beg your pardon, $400 emergency. 37%. So that's about 2 in 5 Americans could afford a $400 emergency. And then also they found that about 60%, I beg your pardon, let me read that again. About 37%, 2 in 5, could not afford a $400 emergency. And about 60% of Americans were unable to afford a $1,000 emergency. So those are pretty high numbers. You're looking at about 40% can't afford a $400 emergency. That's about 2 in 5, 4 out of 10 people cannot. And then you have about 60% that could not afford a $1,000 emergency. So that's 6 out of 10 individuals. And the question is, why is that? That's a question. Why is that? Before we get into how to, go about saving $1,000 or establishing an emergency fund, but many people can't afford those amounts, $400, $1,000 savings. A lot of times because their expenses and their debt is more than their income. And when your expenses are more than your income, or just at the amount of your income, then you have no space, no margin to save, because you're just working to pay off debt or keep up with the debt, making a minimum monthly payments. Most people do that, if that, and just pay your bills, just pay your expenses, your living expenses, your rent, mortgage, utilities, food. And a lot of times, because of that, is difficult for people to save, because there is no margin, no gap between their lifestyle and their income. So the question then is, how do we create that gap in order to save? Well, it's pretty simple. And as I often say, it's because something is simple doesn't make it easy. You know, you can have a simple plan, but the execution of that plan can be difficult. But in order to create that gap between your income and your expenses, what I, teach and what I did for myself and what I teach those individuals that, reached out to me, as I always ask them, look, let me see your bank statements for the past 3 months. And that's what a lot of people don't do. They don't look at their bank statements. They might look at the amount available, whether it's online, but they don't look at the actual statements, the transactions. And I tell individuals, look, let's go over your bank statements for the past 3 months, 90 days, because that's enough time to see trends, to see patterns. And a lot of us have established patterns in our spending that aren't always beneficial to us and to what our financial goals are, if it's just, let's just say in this case, saving an emergency fund. So we look at your bank statements for the past 3 months. That way you can see, all right, where am I spending excess money at? Where am I overspending at? Because a lot of times we swipe our card and just swipe, and not even realizing, oh man, I spent this amount of money. Or we hit enter for DoorDash or enter for Amazon, not realizing that these things add up over the course of time. We look at it as, okay, it's just a $15 purchase this week, then next week a $60 purchase, then the same week another $25 purchase, then by the end of the month you don't spend $200 on Amazon on things that you really don't even use or didn't even want. So, but yeah, you look at your bank statements and see, all right, I'm spending this much on eating out, and that's more than what I should be spending. I might be, some people, I'm looking at seeing individuals cases, even myself, people overspend on DoorDash or Papa John's, eating out all the time. Amazon, like I said, these different websites where you buy things off of, whatever. But you have to look at these things, and see, wow, that's a lot of money. And you'd be surprised how much we spend subconsciously, not even realizing we spend it because it's just become a part of us, you know. And this is why I said, look at your bank statements and see what areas that you're overspending in. Look at your utilities. Your utilities should always be the same, depending upon the season, it's going to be the same. Your rent, your mortgage, basically going to be the same. You know, those things, those items that we use every day should be the same. But it's those other things that we spend money on, outside of the necessities, the expenses, and even with your rent, or your mortgage. And another video I said this, but a rule of thumb that I, recommend, and it's just a rule of thumb, you do what you want. But I've seen when people spend above maybe 20, I'd say 25 to maybe pushing it 30%, but 25% on the safe side of your net income should be your rent or your mortgage. If you go 30%, okay, but try not to go over 30%. And a lot of times people, their mortgages or their rent is like 50% of their income, their monthly income, the net. And then they wondering why they don't have any money to save. Because the living expenses, I know you got to live somewhere, yes, but if rent or your mortgage is 50% of your take-home pay, or that's pretty high, and it's going to be difficult to save. So try to keep your rent, your mortgage, 20, 25, 30%, and that's pushing it 30%. But if your other expenses are low, then you can probably do that. But if you keep it in that range, then that gives you more space, and then you just have your utilities. One thing I recommend, especially, uh, if your utilities fluctuate this season, some companies will offer budget billing, where all right, I'm going to be paying a certain amount every month, regardless of the season. Then, mind you, you might pay a little bit. Let's say in the summer, your gas bill it may only be like $40, but if you get on the budget billing plan, all right, you might pay a little extra. But in the winter, what I mean, it balances out, because in the winter time, your gas bill may be a little higher. Maybe $200, but here you got that $100 budget billing. Then all right, every month it's going to be the same thing, right? So that's another thing that can help you create that margin where you can now save. But the key is definitely looking at your statements for the 3 months. Once you see that, you track everything, write everything down, make categories. All right, groceries, eating out, gas, transportation, subscriptions. Because a lot of times we have subscriptions that we don't even use. We just paying Netflix or paying Apple or paying Amazon these subscriptions, and we don't even use them. So you go through these things, you know, try to lower some of your expenses if you can. If you have auto insurance, I got a website. Not I don't have a website, but I know of a website where you can compare your auto insurance rates, because a lot of people are paying a lot of money on the auto insurance, and there's options out there that can you get a lower rate, the same plan. Website is called compare.com, and I'll put it in the description box. But you can go in there and just get a quote, and I'm telling you, it works. You'd be surprised, but that's one way you have to do. Look at your bank statements, see where the holes are, where you're leaking at, spending money that can be put towards your emergency savings. Once you do that, create a budget. You got to create a budget. If you never created a budget, I recommend the Every Dollar Budgeting app. And one thing I do when people reach out to me, we go over this app. I give a tutorial, and we break it down and help them out. And those people that I have helped out with this particular budgeting tool, they've been very thankful, and it's been very helpful. I still use it, I started back in 2020, and I still use it to this day. And you're just getting used to it. It might, be a little, difficult in the beginning, but you keep at it. Eventually, it just becomes like second nature, right? So, but you got to create a budget. Once you create that budget, then you can see, all right, now I have some margin. Now I have some space between my income and my expenses slash debt, because I created that. I looked over my uh, my bank statements. I see the the holes, the overspending in areas. Created a budget. Now I got some extra money, and then once you figure it out, once you create that margin, that gap, then you can start saving. Then you can build up that starter emergency fund, right? And you know, if you do it right, and your income is, even if your income is not that high, so to speak, because income doesn't matter. What matters is what you keep in. And if you got you created yourself a $200, you know, a month difference, then start there. Just put that $200 up every month, whatever it is you created. Put that money up in a savings account so you save your $1,000. And what I also recommend when saving your starter emergency fund at $1,000, don't keep it in your regular bank that you do your everyday transactions with. Right? Some banks will offer you a checkings account and a savings. Well, most banks, they all banks. I haven't seen a bank that haven't offer you a checking and a savings account. But what I notice people do, and even myself was guilty, I would keep my savings at the same financial institution, the same bank that I had my checkings in. And then what would happen is if I needed money for something and I didn't have it available in my check-ins, I would pull from my savings, and it'll be so quick, just a matter of pushing a button, and then I'm taking from my savings. Where my savings should be for emergencies, for things unexpected, right? Not like Domino's, like they got an emergency pizza. I'm not using my emergency savings to buy an emergency pizza, right, or an emergency pair of shoes. No, my savings is for unexpected things. You might need my car might go out or something. I need, or something around the house. Might need a new refrigerator, or roof, might be leaking or something like that. That's an emergency, right? Or whatever you define as an emergency, that's truly an emergency, right? So you want to keep that emergency savings in a separate bank account at a separate institution. And there's most people keep it in their, regular bank that they do their, everyday transactions with. And like I said, they constantly dipping into it, constantly transferring money from it. Every day you transferring money from your savings. And then when it's time for something to happen, you don't have anything in there. So I advise you keep it in another account, separate bank. And one bank that I recommend, as long as it's a high yield savings, high yield savings account, then high yield interest savings, then that's good. But I recommend what I use, and what I recommend is called Ally Bank. Right? It's an online bank. Right now they're offering about 4% interest, you know, you know, annually. But with the savings account, you're not trying to get rich off of it. But if I'm going to allow my money to sit somewhere, then I should let it earn, the most that it can. Because a lot of times people keep their savings in their bank that they, do their everyday transaction with, or a credit union, and the interest rate might be less than 1%. Some people don't even know the interest rate that they're getting in their savings account, so, but I would recommend a high yield savings account. Again, ally.com is something I use, and you can, create different buckets for different things, like emergency savings, or, if you like to travel, you can, make a bucket for your travel. So they call them sinking funds, basically, but they're like buckets, where after you establish your $1,000 and you want to save for other things, short term or whatever, you can do that. But again, it's going to be hard to do that if your expenses and your income is right here, or your expenses is up here and your income is down there, so you want to create that gap. And again, the way you can do that, look over your bank statements, 90 days worth, 3 months, and look at the trends. Like, some things are always going to be the same, but a lot of times people are overspending in areas that they don't need to be overspending in, and then they get hard to save. But again, once you get that $1,000, now what I teach is, now you can start attacking your debt. You know, attacking your debt, especially those debts that are high interest. And I like to use the debt snowball. But again, I don't do a one. That's a general recommendation, but when I work with people individually, it may vary because of the situations. But definitely, I highly recommend the debt snowball. You put your debts in order from the smallest to the largest, regardless of the interest rate. But typically, most people, their largest debt is, I mean, the smallest debt is probably credit cards with 27% interest, 30% interest on it, So, yeah, but you knock out those debts, while still, have your emergency $1,000 already set aside, knock out those debts after you get that set aside. That way, if something, an emergency comes up, I have that $1,000 there, you know, and I don't have to go back to using credit cards or going into debt to pay for an emergency. So I got that baby emergency fund there, $1,000. I use that again as a rule of thumb because it may vary, depending upon the individuals, some factors. But for the most part, general $1,000. Once you get that, attack your debt. Knock out those high interest credit cards or payday loans. Definitely payday loans. Because payday loans, you paying like 100, 200% interest. So you want to definitely knock those out if you have them. But the debt snowball, just put your debts in order from smallest to largest, regardless of the interest rate. That way you can get those quick wins. Knock out those little credit cards, $500 credit cards, $300 credit cards. And what people don't realize is if your credit limit is like $500 or $300, then that means the banks don't trust you. That means your finances are not in order. The banks don't trust you. You know, so they're gonna give you $300, $500. That means they don't trust you. So that's because they see something that you don't even see about your finances. But yeah, but once you get those debts out, with the exception of your mortgage, and in some cases, it depends on the individual, right? Because it depends on the individual because everybody's situation is different. But once you get a lot of those debts out, then you can build up your 3 to 6 months because now all you're doing now is just taking all the money that you was putting towards the debts. Once you knock out those debts with the exception of your mortgage, and again, I go by case situation, but I'm gonna just stick with just the mortgage for now. Then you can take that money and now establish your 3 to 6 months, right? Because now all the money that you was putting towards your debt, right? You paying off your debt, smallest to largest, making those minimum payments on all of them, except for that smallest debt. Any extra money, you just put all that towards that smallest debt. Once you knock out the smallest, roll all that money, just put into the smallest, put it to the next smallest, while making the minimum payments on the other debts. And once you get that out of the way, then you can build your 3 to 6 months, right? And on average, it shouldn't take you long to save $1,000, maybe a month or 2 months, depending upon you, right? Depending upon you. And then the debt, depending upon the debt, could take you more like 24 months, 2 years, but it's not, it seems like somebody said 2 years, that's a long time, but 2 years is going to go by anyway. So I might as well put forth the work. And then when 2 years is done, then I'm free from those certain debts. Then I can, start building up. My starting emergency fund to that 3 to 6 months. Just take all that money I was putting towards my debt now, and now put it towards that 3 to 6 months. And it shouldn't take you long, you know. And it just requires, again, like a lot of discipline. Like I always say, discipline is key. And I often describe discipline as uh, depriving yourself of pleasure for the present for long-term success. So it does take discipline, but it's achievable, it's attainable. So yeah, I mean, it's not hard. I mean, I'm not gonna say that. I'll take that back. It is hard. It is hard, but it's not a sim. It's not a. It's a simple plan. It is difficult. It is because you can get discouraged easily because you're saying you it's like, man, I don't see anything. But you just got to keep at it. I don't see any progress, but just keep at it, and you're not a quick fix. It didn't take overnight to get in that predicament, right? That financial predicament. So it's not going to take you overnight to get out of it. So just got to stick with it. But yeah, the emergency savings fund, you definitely want to have that. And again, keep it separate. Just keep it separate from your regular banking, because I'm telling you, I've done it and I've seen people do it. They dip into it. They dip into it, and next thing you know, it's like they're not making any progress. But again, appreciate everybody's support. Hope these videos have been helpful. I hope this video has been helpful. And if it has been helpful, again, like, subscribe, share, leave a comment. And again, um, even if you don't agree with what I'm saying, I always say, there's nothing wrong with disagreeing. It's just a matter of being respectful in the midst of our disagreements. But thank you again for your support. Again, if you're ready to escape the rat race and get off the rat wheel, come visit me. And I'm gonna say this: even if you don't visit me, and you can just use the information and do it for yourself. I just want to help people. That's all. I want to help people because I know what it's like. I've been there. I know what it's like. You know, living paycheck to paycheck, regardless of your income. Regardless of your income, I know what it's like not having savings and having to dip into, retirement savings, dip into your 401k, and that's a whole nother top video about doing like borrowing from your retirement. That's a whole nother video that I'll get into in one day in the future, because I would never, I ain't gonna say I wouldn't recommend that, but that's a whole nother video. But I know what it's like, I know what it's like, and I just want to help individuals that are going through what I've been through, But if you're ready to get off the rat race, get out the rat race, get off that rat wheel, visit me at truefincoaching.com. Schedule your consultation. We can see how we can help you, and we can help you invest in yourself and begin on that path to doing the things you want to do when you want to do them, instead of having to do the things that you don't want to do. Peace and blessings.